everybody, welcome back to Ignite Your Fridays, the show where what we're seeking to do is shift your mindset, elevate you and have you feeling in a much better space and really just prepare you for the weekend that's up ahead. As you've noticed before, we've addressed a few serious topics that shift the way people see themselves, and so we've decided that we really want to continue with something in this line. We've addressed gender-based violence and we've addressed the issues that women face. But what we haven't yet done is tapped onto the various perspectives that men sit on, tapped onto the male experience and what it is that is actually going on under the surface. I'm very excited to have a guest here today who is ready to speak about this and open up about his experience of trauma, of abuse. I'm Leanne Ruth, and with me I have Krista Brain. How are you?
Really well. It's a fantastic Friday and I'm really excited to be sharing my experience with you.
I'm excited that you're sharing the experience as well, specifically because it's something very serious.
Yeah.
It's something very intimate and private, and I think that it's very brave of you, specifically because in the world men are required to show up as this perfectly poised, having it all together all the time, and also always being up here.
Yes.
You find that the average guy is not really noticed even.
Yes.
You know?
Absolutely.
And I think that those people, I think so many men, as you see all these women empowerment things and black empowerment, and everybody's empowered except for the average guy.
Yeah.
And the average guy is going through so much just trying to make his way in the world.
Yeah, you know, you touched on something there when you mentioned me as brave. What my goal is to take away that concept and have it something, and have it to be something that's normal to address.
Absolutely.
And to speak about.
Absolutely.
And to normalize discussing these issues that men face.
I absolutely
So it's not
agree.
something they have to psych themselves up to do.
Yes.
It's something that they can just do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I absolutely agree with you, Chris. And you're 100% correct. You know, the platform that exists for women in being able to say whatever they feel just doesn't exist for men.
Yes.
Yeah. So, Chris, your story, you've said that you have gone through depression for the greater majority of your life.
Yes.
You had a lot of trauma in your youth. You've been on antidepressants at a very young age. You were at that point where you were not really sure of how you were feeling it, almost to the verge of suicide, which is something I personally can relate to.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Okay, so I'm 36 now, and I've actually been under treatment for about the past 6 years. My psychiatrist told me that given my history, I've actually been depressed for most of my life.
Wow.
So there was the trauma that I experienced, and
If I may ask, at what age?
man, you know, to be honest with you, I can't remember roughly 2/3 of my life because mentally I've blocked it out. So as far back as I can remember, which is around about the time I was bullied as well at school, which is what we would call grade 1, grade 2 at that time. That's as far back as mentally I can trace.
As you can trace.
Yeah, and I mean, it was quite a situation. Even the teachers at school wouldn't come to my aid. I would be bullied by them as well. And the earliest I can remember feeling suicidal was in standard 4, grade 6. And yeah, you know, all this time I've been on sort of a roller coaster and sort of a journey in discovering who I actually am, minus all of the trauma and everything.
Yeah.
And I only came to that sort of realization and that awakening around 30 years old. But from then it was always, I mean, the kind of medication I was on, it actually suppressed my adrenal gland because my body was always in fight or flight mode. So it's extreme highs, lots of energy, loads of energy to extreme lows. I discovered, well, you know, I mean, after school, all of my relationships were strained. I always kept a small group of friends, and it felt like those were always the people that understood me. I'm introverted. You never say so from the podcast and the interviews and stuff that I do. But it was a long journey to get to that place where I could actually be social, where I could actually interact normally without feeling offended, without feeling hurt, without feeling ashamed of what I went through as well. So, man, to cut a long story short, I've always been running on the spot. I've always been surviving, and So that would cause me to have outbursts, that would cause me to be very angry, to fight with people constantly. And I didn't know what it was because a lot of the causes I suppressed. I suppressed it. And now, where I'm at right now is you only discover what a trigger is once you've been triggered. And I'm in a space now where I can identify it. Yeah.
That's actually quite interesting that you say that, because you actually need to be quite healed, or healed to a large extent, to be able to realize this is a trigger. Just to have that single thought, this is a trigger. To step outside of the reaction, to be able to go, hold on, I'm being triggered.
Yeah. I had a lot of unhealthy coping mechanisms. I went into hospitality after school, and I absolutely loved it. But the thing is, I pushed myself way too far for somebody who has not been healed, or somebody who has not approached healing. And as a result, I ended up abusing alcohol and having to quit my job. I was having very severe anxiety attacks, like curled up in a ball on the floor in a bathroom stall, the anxiety. And man, I decided that I need to change. And I left hospitality because 18-hour days didn't really suit me. Mentally, it wasn't aiding to my cause at all. But then after that, I felt like I was always playing catch up with feeling well, with feeling whole. And when I embarked on this journey, I actually did an exercise which I have to urge any viewers. You have to do it in a controlled environment. I actually started mapping out my entire family, what everybody's issues were, what everybody's afflictions were, and basically discovering who Chris is. Why do I like the food that I like? Why do I watch things that I like? Why are my friends this way? Why do I love dogs so much? And because everything has a root. And then once I discovered that, I actually got incredibly triggered, because a lot of pain that I experienced came flashing back and came storming right back. And I burnt out because I wasn't sleeping. I was paranoid. I was ill. When that's what you do with a counselor. That's what you do. Like I said, in a very, very controlled environment. So that really caused me to spiral.
Yeah.
And it was weighing hard on my family, on my friends, and even just my personal life. It was very, very difficult to feel like I was afloat. And the thing that I want people to understand is that with this issue of depression, like people would struggle to believe that I am an introvert, because you put on this face every time when you go out of what the world expects you to be, which is something that you alluded to a bit earlier. And you can't anymore. My body literally it didn't even hit pause, it hit stop. And then that's when I started going to treatment once. Hitting rock bottom is never a good thing, but for me personally, rock bottom is a pretty solid foundation to start.
To bounce back. So I have to ask you this, because I think that people must know where it all starts from, right? And usually you end up experiencing a trauma in your younger years that changes you. Can you remember how you were changed the first time from your first trauma?
I was a very soft target for kids, man. I cried a lot. I had a lot of anxiety of things that just asked me to go to the bathroom. I couldn't do that. And I used to spend a lot of time just alone by myself. I have two fantastic sisters, but they were much older than me. So here I am, basically growing up alone, and even my parents tried to foster a kid as well, and I never got along with it. So just very, very dysfunctional, and not being able to actually point it out, because that's what you think that life is.
Yeah. So when you then experience a trauma at such a young age, there are various coping mechanisms that you take on from then, because you see, the thing is, as an adult male, right?
Yeah.
You can turn to alcohol, and you can turn to drugs, or whatever it ends up being, and you can blame it on the stress of work, whatever. But the truth of the matter is, there's an underlying trauma and a coping mechanism that develops.
Yes.
So setting the trauma aside and speaking to the coping mechanism, what were the coping mechanisms that you developed as a boy? And I want to speak to this because I think that people need to be able to identify trauma by way of the coping mechanisms in their kids. Exactly. Because the truth is that the kids, especially little boys, they're not going to open up.
Yes.
So we've been little boys have been conditioned by society to keep quiet, hold it in, be a man, and. So what were the coping mechanisms you developed?
I used to get into so many fights. I was constantly defensive all of the time.
Were you the bully or were you being bullied?
I was being bullied. And man, I cried all the time. The memories that I do have, there are a few really, really great memories, but for the most part, it was being alone. It was shying away, keeping to myself, not participating in group activities like sports. And even at home, I would get aggressive if I felt like I needed to defend myself.
Yes.
And kids, they mess with each other, the siblings mess with you, and it feels like I always took it way too far in terms of my reaction to what was happening. So it really didn't feel like I was a normal, happy child. I had toys, I had pets, I had, and sort of escaping in my mind in sort of like a fantasy world, I think that was probably, when I was by myself, was probably the biggest coping mechanism, was that disassociation.
Yes.
From reality. It was an escape, and that was something I had to address when I was older.
Do you think that your family could have picked up on this way of being at that age? Because you got to that point where you were suicidal at a very young age.
Yeah. I just have to give props to my mother. She was there as much as she could be,
As much as you would allow her.
As much as I would allow, but also she was keeping our entire family together. There was always something going on. So I think another sort of coping mechanism that I had was sort of to even downplay asking for help as well. A, because you probably don't feel worthy of help. And then secondly, you see what's going on and what your family is going through.
Yeah.
And you don't want to add to that. You feel bad, or you feel like it's your fault that everybody is so upset, even though it has nothing to do with you.
Do you think that little boys have the support base in their family and their friends to be able to say what they feel?
In general, I would say no. Because, as much as we live in this alleged age of enlightenment, still it's a boys don't cry thing. It's a boys
Absolutely.
don't. And the signs, like if a typical example is that if your child doesn't like someone, family, friend, uncle, whatever, if they stay away from them, if they feel uneasy, then as a parent, I feel that people need to be very direct in asking them, okay, why? Why don't you feel like this? Why are you uncomfortable like this? Because we don't see anything.
And not in an aggressive way as well.
And not in an aggressive way. I think it's just getting, like I said, normalizing the discussion around things like abuse, around trauma.
Yes.
And if you have that conversation with a child from an early age, and I know being colored, a lot of colored families don't discuss things like that because there's a stigma as well.
Of course.
So if you see that your child is upset or crying or whatever, I know a lot of people who would have beat their child to say, stop, you don't behave like this.
Yes.
As opposed to, okay, you're crying more often than a normal child would, A, it's okay to cry, but B, find out why. Have discussions with your children. And I think
and if your child doesn't open up, acknowledge that it's not in a child's nature to make things up.
Yes.
If a child is uncomfortable around somebody, there's probably a reason.
Exactly.
And if they're not telling you why, that's even more cause for concern.
Yeah. So, kids, their judgment isn't clouded by experiences that adults go through,
Yes.
And sort of that cynicism and that skepticism that adults have. Kids are very, very pure. They can pick up on things and behaviors a lot easier. And I think parents don't connect as well as they should with their children.
No, they don't.
So that it's an absolute safe space, and I love it. My sister is raising my nieces. They, in such a profound way, they understand who they are. They understand what is not acceptable, and they also understand that if something happens, there's no shame in coming forward to talk about it.
I also think, just in terms of the conditioning, as colored kids, we kind of raise that, when you say goodbye to somebody, whether that child wants to or not, their mother will say to them, no, go kiss auntie so-and-so goodbye. Don't do that. If a kid is feeling uncomfortable, permit them their private and personal space.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So then, Chris, having gone through this and now already being a tarnished lotus blossom, how do you go into your teen years with it? now entering into high school?
My first girlfriend, man, she was incredibly dysfunctional. She was being abused at home and everything. And it's in a way, I didn't go through exactly what she went through. She went through some absolutely horrific things, like some law and order SVU type stuff. But I didn't know, again, that kind of dysfunction that she was portraying. She was pulling out her hair, she was cutting, and I just thought, okay, that's how people deal with
Whatever.
stuff. For me, it was normal. And you end up being very dysfunctional. I mean, I always thought I was fat for some reason. I really wasn't. Now I'm fat, but back then,
You're well-rounded.
I'm fluffy, yeah. And I really did not like myself. I had low self-esteem. I couldn't speak in public. I couldn't do presentations. I always had very severe anxiety around everyday normal things. So as a result, I shied away from even prepping for things like speeches, things like reading in public, and it was just something that I battled with throughout high school. I didn't know who I was. I wasn't secure in who I was, and again, just running on the spot, thinking that you're going somewhere that you're really not.
So when you're going through that as a teenager, because I feel like who you are up until you are 8, actually up until you're about 8, up until 8 is one person. And then there's a different person from 8 up until about 13. And then from 13 to 18, there's a different person. So now you come out of 18 and now you enter into the world where you can be who you are uncensored.
Yeah.
But the truth is that you are a broken individual. You're like a flower where the petals couldn't open properly. You warped. You don't quite know what's going on over there. How do you then make your way in the world?
I didn't know what boundaries were at all. I fell in love with hospitality. I was really good at it. Finished almost top of my classes.
What was it about hospitality that made you feel like this was where you could blossom?
To be honest with you, I actually do not know. I went there because that was one of the few options that my incredibly poor matric results allowed me. You know, I'm not surprised that I passed. But
question quickly, was your matric results a symptom of everything you're going through and not being in a space where you could take in what you needed to?
Yes, absolutely. So that not wanting to prepare, that disassociation, that hiding from the pressure, hiding from excelling even. And I I signed up for sports at school. I didn't really do them or participate or anything. And even though I was a fairly active child and I'm very competitive, but again, I discovered that only afterwards.
Yeah.
So the poor results were because
you were in a bad
didn't believe
environment.
in myself, yeah.
And you were in a bad environment. The truth is that as an adult, had you been going through what you were going through, you'd be on antidepressants, but then you were asked to deal with the world as it was.
Yes, absolutely. So, I went into hospitality and I picked up the information really well. I didn't really have to study because I was participating in class.
But also you were taught to absorb as much as you can in order to survive.
Yes, exactly.
Gotcha.
But then, I learned that my learning style was different, that I retain information by communication rather than just what they call it parrot fashion,
Yes.
And yeah, so I absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
I got a fantastic internship through City Lodge Hotels. I became a duty manager at 21, 22 of a 4-star hotel. That was really big. I was going there, but again, things felt right, so obviously I need to do more of that. That was my thinking. And so worked myself into the absolute ground.
But work was also, I suppose, an escape from so much.
Yes.
Because it's the first time you feel like yourself, in yourself.
But now, the problem is everybody you went to hotel school with, people in the industry, you pay for very little, and you work in 18 hours, you party for 4 hours at that age, you've got this income all of a sudden, and I burnt out quite severely because imagine working 18 hours a day, partying
I totally understand.
for 4 years straight.
Yes.
Body stopped.
Then what happened?
I resigned from my job.
Can you tell us just about the burnout? Because I think a lot of people don't know what that means.
Okay, so basically I pushed my body as far as I could. eventually I was getting to a point where I couldn't sleep because I was so stressed out. I wasn't at peace at all, and I used to drink to sleep. And by drink, I mean like down a bottle of wine, just to close your eyes, type situation.
There are
And then
many
not
people
sleep
in
for
that
long.
situation.
And so I really, and caffeine, you know, we're talking about maybe a liter of coffee throughout the day, and just going like a locomotive. So like as a result now, I mean, okay, let's go into what happened. So yeah, I was overdoing it on the caffeine and caffeinated beverages.
Yeah.
And trying to keep up to achieve some sort of lifestyle. I had no vision of where I was going. I just knew that
Could you, though?
this is what I have to do.
When you come from the background that you come from and you've been put in a state of survival, can you know where you're going to go?
No, but yet you're moving somehow. You just running on the
Yeah.
spot, overworking yourself, and my body literally just said no. A friend of mine, I would go on to date her, but she like eventually took me to church.
Yeah.
And working in hospitality, almost every Sunday you're at work. So
Yes.
even then, in the state that I was in, I just knew I had to go in an environment where I felt a bit better.
Yeah.
And my healing started from there, from being able
Yeah.
to do stuff with free time, which I
Yeah.
didn't really have, or rather use my time more constructively.
So you have this burnout, you have this breakdown, you decide, okay, that's it, I'm done. I need to take some time for myself.
Yes.
And so you walk away from work and you now are in this time where you can start being a little more free and doing things. At what point did you realize that you needed some additional help and that there was this underlying trauma? Because so many people just carry on.
Yeah.
You know, they get to a point where they can feel okay with the day, and then we go back to work and we go back to the relationship and we go back to this. And what they actually do is they distract themselves
Yeah.
from what is actually sitting and going on the inside over here.
Yeah.
How did you know that you needed to address that?
Yeah, so with the burnout, I mean, my body, like I always say, my body hit stop instead of pause, and I was bedridden for about 3 months. I have to take vitamins every single day because it's like I'm playing catch up for all of the damage
Yeah.
that I've done. It was tough, man. I mean, if I don't get 8 hours sleep now,
Yeah.
then I'm an absolute wreck.
Yeah.
The next day. So I always put myself first in a lot of decisions that I make, even as a business person. And for an entrepreneur, it's very easy to try and overextend yourself.
Absolutely.
So I'm learning right now is how to put those boundaries and steps
Yeah.
in place, because I was a wreck. I was an absolute wreck. I think, you know, when I went to the church, I started getting counseling from there. And really working through and discussing a lot of things with my family as well. But the after effects of that kind of burnout, severe burnout, still linger to this day.
Absolutely.
And I didn't address them properly from that first burnout, so I got burnt out the second time when I started my own business eventually.
Wow. Well, look, Chris, unfortunately we're out of time, but there is a lot of information that we still need to get out of you. I think that the truth of the matter is we're only halfway down the line.
Yeah.
And I think we've touched on a few topics that definitely need to be delved into significantly a lot further.
Absolutely.
So we will definitely do that. Guys, unfortunately, we need to say goodbye, but we will definitely be back next week. So please do stay tuned. There is a lot more to Chris's story. And I know that there are so many more individuals, not just men, but individuals that have gone through exactly the same process. We are literally only touching the surface right now. So please do join us next week. We will go into what it is like as an adult going through all of these different emotions, going through these anxieties, trying to continue to better yourself, trying to continue to be an adult, make your way through the world, build your career, be okay, have a relationship, when the truth of the matter is you've still got all these things that are going on.
Yeah.
You're ticking the boxes,